Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our committee. Thank you for coming, Minister. Just for the benefit of the tape and those listening, could you just introduce yourself, please, and your position?
I'm Gillian. I'm the Minister for Apprenticeships and Skills.
Thank you. Just given the announcements that have come out today that have been trailed in the media, I just wondered if you could set out what actually the government are announcing to our committee so that Parliament can hear what's going on.
Okay, well, a couple of weeks ago, we announced a plan for jobs, which was really focused and targeted on young people. But today's announcement is focused and targeted on adults. So how we enable adults who, through no fault of their own, may find themselves redundant, may find themselves working in an industry that has been highly impacted by coronavirus and may be looking to accelerate their reskilling, upskilling, or get a new opportunity. So it's really focused on making sure that we support adults through this process. So the first thing is to make sure that every adult has an entitlement to level 3, which is A-level equivalent full-time course, and that's specifically in areas that have higher value. So we're making sure that it matches the skills gaps in the economy. Flexible loans to get to reach the higher levels, and that's also flexible learning. So we're looking to make it more flexible in terms of how you access earning and also how you access loans, and that's for the higher levels up to levels 4 and 5. We are announcing and have announced today the expansion of the skills toolkit, which is something we introduced very quickly to help people on furlough, to help people who were looking to make sure they increase their employability during these uncertain times. So the skills toolkit's expanded today from 17 to 80 courses, and then we're also starting, we're spreading, there's been 2 initial pilots in digital boot camps, and we're going to continue with those, and then obviously look to roll out further boot camps in other areas as well. And at the moment, we've been thinking about construction and engineering. And of course, that's on top of the apprenticeships, which we know 50% of the apprentices are adults who are using apprenticeships to upskill and reskill and get new opportunities.
And is there going to be any support for maintenance in terms of maintenance grants or loans for disadvantaged students in terms of these new packages?
There are at the moment these sort of discretionary funds which are there to help support disadvantaged students or those that have additional barriers to and hurdles. So we have, they're used for anything, transport, childcare. During coronavirus, so they were used to make sure everybody had digital connectivity as well. So sometimes they were used for advice and data, for devices and data. But we do have that system where we have a discretionary bursary loans, which the colleges have some funding to be able to utilise.
And do you have details of the courses that these funds will be available for at the moment?
We don't have details of the courses, but if you look at the skills recovery plan that we put in place, which was increasing the entitlement for 19-year-olds, it kind of at that point went through some of the areas that really match well onto and map well onto where we have real skills shortage in the economy. But they're quite broad ranging. We've got education, health and social care, construction, engineering, teaching, policing, anything to do with data and digital, nursing, obviously, many areas where, if you remember, Rob, probably what we would have been talking at before coronavirus is how are we going to fill these skills gaps? We've got hundreds of thousands of skills gaps in all of these areas, and we need to upskill and reskill our population so that we can fill these skills gaps. So it'll be in those areas where we know there's a lot of employer demand.
And do you have any figures for what the take-up you expect or want it to be of these new announcements?
No, we don't. Obviously it is available to everybody. So now this is a universal entitlement for anybody. It was there up to the age of 23. Now from 24 up until whatever age, you still have the energy and motivation. There's no age limit. And, we know we're going to be living a lot longer, having many different careers change. We're in our second career, many of us, but second and third careers will become part of the future of work. So we want to be there to make sure that at whatever age, at whatever stage you want to develop your next career, you can get the support.
And before we're going to go into some detail in terms of adult learning. Before I move on to something I'm going to ask you about, particularly community learning, do any colleagues have any specific questions on today's announcement, what the Minister just said? Oh, please, David Simmons.
So we heard from LGA research that there's around £730 million unspent in European social fund budgets, which will have to be returned to Brussels if they're not spent by the end of the year. Is there an opportunity to repurpose some of that money to provide resources to support this work?
Well, we are doing some work at the moment to look at what the replacement for the European Social Fund will look like and how we transition from one to another. So I guess that will be part of the discussions. I don't know the specifics, but I would imagine there is some sort of restrictions in terms of what, there are criteria and strict criteria for what it can be used for. But I know that that whole discussion about what we do to reach those hardest to reach learners and what we do to replace that are ongoing at the moment. And there's a number of proposals that are being made to have our own UK version of that.
Thank you. Flo.
Thank you, Chair, and it's very good to see you. Minister, thank you for taking the time to be with us today. Such an important issue for youth, for employment across all of our constituencies. I just have a question about access, and a barrier to level 3 is often childcare for many people. So I've been working in an ESOL teaching session where the biggest barrier was childcare. And have you given any thought, or will there be any plans for childcare services to be available alongside the level 3 teaching to enable people to take up the offer?
Well, obviously, we do have the sort of universal childcare offer of 30 hours per week. In addition, there is the bursary can also be flexed to cover specific childcare arrangements, but we haven't looked further than that about having a specific childcare package which is linked to this. I mean, we do have obviously a lot of discussions about making sure that the 30 hours is available and that people can utilise that very easily. That's a relatively new scheme. But I have spoken to a number of people who, particularly in the area of community learning as well, which is very often women going back after having a family, looking to improve their career prospects, and basically how they work with those colleges and how the flexibility is enabled as well, I think is a key of what we're going to be looking to achieve going forward. We've all gone through a massive lesson with coronavirus. Everything went online by necessity, but it has actually uncovered a lot of our capability, which we now can deliver quite a lot of very high technical, high quality experience online. So being able to flex that blended learning, I think, will really help with mothers and with enabling them to adapt that to their family situation.
I would agree with you. Community learning is absolutely key, and often an additional question when asked about what services are provided, if childcare can be provided in the place of the learning alongside with them, instead of only through the additional childcare offers, that can then unlock all of the courses to people who find it hardest to access them.
Kim, and then Tom.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Gillian. I just wanted some clarification really about the flexible loans that you've mentioned, because if people lose the job and they have this universal entitlement to full-time training, how are they expected to pay for the loans if they're on universal credit?
So I think the first thing is there's a number of things that are free. So the skills toolkit is free. This new level 3 entitlement, so up to A levels, will be free for all adults. The flexible loans structure is really referring to both making the courses more flexible and making those more flexible for higher level. So if you go to level 4, level 5, even up to level 6, so it's more similar to the university grades there. So I think the vast majority of people will be able to access for free something that will enable them to, to develop their skills, particularly in areas that are highly valuable. The level 4 and 5, we have very few people doing level 4 and 5, and we're trying to encourage more people to do level 4 and 5, that's HNC and HND equivalents, and they will be offered through the loan system. But the payback on those is very, very good. You know, they're very highly valued by employers, and many employers actually will sponsor people to do those as well.
Thank you. Can I just ask one final question as well about whether local authorities can allocate any of their unspent apprenticeship levy to help the anticipated rise in youth unemployment? Thank you.
Yes, and it's a very important point. What we've been trying to do is to make you know, this 25% that's unutilized that can be passed on, to make that work better, more quickly. You know, we'd like to be able to use it today. So we've introduced a number of flexibilities, and we're working with the mayoral combined authorities, some of which are basically acting like a clearinghouse, a broker almost, to take all that unspent levy that can be transferred, to use it, as you say, to provide opportunities and to be able to, you know, really lubricate and pump prime this SME market, which, you know, is something that we've been trying to do, but we need to do more urgently. So that's something that we've introduced flexibilities, and we're working with, we've got a number of pilots actually across a lot of the combined authorities.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. Good news.
Tom.
As a minimum, should funding for the education and skills strand of the new UK Shared Prosperity Fund match that of the previous European Social Fund? And does the department have enough input into plans for the Successor programme to the European Social Fund?
I mean, yeah, obviously we're trying to make sure that we, you know, over the course of this, that we make sure that we have a fund that meets our needs. At the same time, we've got more investment going into other areas. So, you know, overall, you know, it's not really about the budget lines. It's really about addressing the need and making sure that we have a sufficient fund to address those that are further away from the market, from the employment market, which is really what that was addressing. And of course, you know, even without that, we've already tripled the number of traineeships, which is really focused on trying to get young people who are further away from the market. So I'm less focused on, you know, as we're increasing lots of budgets and we're increasing our focus in this area, about which particular pot it goes in, but that actually it meets the needs of those users, whether they have particular disadvantage they're trying to overcome, whether they're further away from the market, and to make sure that they get all the opportunities that we can in terms of making sure that's available. So at the moment,
okay, Tom.
We've heard a number of mayoral combined authorities call for that money to be devolved down to them. It does seem to me that they're probably best placed to know their areas and how to invest that money. We also heard a lot about, when it comes to UK Shared Prosperity Fund, money going to the Scottish Parliament and the Welsh Assembly. Perhaps that misses the trick and actually be further localised.
Yeah, I think, you know, a lot of the AEB and the Prosperity Fund is devolved to those areas that do have that structure in place. I mean, there's only, I think, 7 that have had it devolved so far, and it will be up to 9. But most of it, you know, is devolved today. But the rest of the country, clearly it's not devolved because we don't have those structures in place. We've been, we agree, you know, trying to make sure that we have that local labour market view, what the vacancies are, what the key skills gaps are, and making sure that the provision really matches that is key, and to make sure that we, you know, we can really optimise the opportunities for everyone. So yes, that is what we're planning on doing.
Just finally on this, what is there going to be additional help for those with special educational needs in terms of taking up this offering, the new offering from the National Skills Fund?
I mean, we have that obligation to make sure that all of our offers are accessible to anybody with special educational needs, and that will include this as well. So we will definitely make sure that these courses are accessible to those with special.
Right, and will that be reflected in whatever you publish in terms of how those with special educational needs will be able to benefit from this?
Yes, we will definitely make them available to people with, and that will be published as part of the, you know, we are very concerned to make sure that everybody can access, that our courses are accessible.
Right. Okay, thank you. If I can just move on now to community learning. To my best knowledge, the last time the government put forward a robust strategy on community learning was in 2011, when it was published, and it was called New Challenges, New Chances. Why has there been no strategic paper on adult community learning since this time, and how high up is this on the list of priorities? Is community learning on the list of priorities for the department?
Well, it is a key focus of the department, because as I said before, community learning does tend to focus on specific groups, and particular women. There's a lot of, I think about 73% of the take-up is women, and women looking to go back to work. What we're looking to do is to make sure that we have a system that works very well, and really is focused on line to employment. There's a couple of things that have happened that I think are quite significant in the DfE. The first thing is the fact we've embraced employer-led standards into all of our qualifications to make sure that what people are investing their time and sometimes their money in studying is going to lead to a job and to a better job. So that's the focus, the real focus. We have very little data on community learning, and I've actually tried to get, a lot more sort of clarity, because it's devolved to a lot of authority.
Yeah. So why is the announcement today, it's not about community learning? I think it's a very good announcement, but why isn't it more of a priority for the department? What monitoring of community learning are you doing to identify where there are cold spots, where there is need, and are you doing enough to widen the reach of community learning centres?
Well, the first thing is the announcement today is really very much focused on the economic outcomes for individuals, making sure that they can have an offer which helps improve their employability and helps improve the chance of getting a job. That is actually the biggest focus we have at the moment, because of the impact that coronavirus has had in disrupting our economy. In terms of community learning, we have some analysis that's going on to see exactly what benefits the community learning, make sure that we understand those things that really are valuable in terms of community learning. But there is a full offer for those adults. What we're trying to make sure is every segment of our society has an opportunity to learn something and to be supported into things that are going to benefit.
Okay, so if you take, for example, Ofsted's 2018-2019 annual report, 92% of community learning and skills providers were rated good or outstanding.
Yep.
The head of HOLEX has said that community learning centres are right at the top of their game. We've got a 2016 randomised controlled trial on community-based English language provision, showing that students doubled their English language proficiency, improved their social interaction ability. And there are many statistics out there in terms of the success of community learning, and yet very little is said about it by ministers. And there is sort of second-hand view that some senior officials in the department don't regard community learning as important, and that all of it should be focused on what you've just described as the economic side of the equation. Well, I would regard both as the economic side.
Well, the community learning, just so we're clear, so that all the basic access to basic numeracy, basic literacy, we've just added basic digital skills to that, which has been introduced in August. English as a second language, of course, is included in community learning, and all of that is absolutely vital in helping people progress into the workplace, and also onto other qualifications and other skills. But they're the building blocks, and you're absolutely right. The community learning, I've visited a number of community learning institutions, speaking to people who perhaps had not even thought that this was available for them, had not even thought that, that would not even have the confidence to walk through the door of a college, and to be able to get them and to help them into that point where they can overcome any barriers, they can get the basic skills, and then they can fly. And I've met many now doing level 4.
So government evaluation 2018, 52% of their learners who started courses with significant mental health issues, anxiety, depression, no longer presented those symptoms at the end of their course. And we know that the mental health and well-being of adults and young people has suffered enormously during the pandemic. Have you considered actively the role that community learning centres can play in our help, in our recovery from the coronavirus?
Yes, I mean, I think every sector can play a part to help us recover in coronavirus. I mean, there's been an awful lot of investment and focus on mental health, and particularly mental health for students, for young people in college, etc. So there has been that investment. Community learning is kind of been badged in a particular way in the way the budgets work, in the DFE. I think what we're moving on to is we're talking about all those individuals, all those segments of society, all those individual needs, understanding their barriers, making sure we help them overcome it, and making sure they get the best possible support to be able to get on in life. And obviously we have an opportunity with the National Skills Fund and with the things we're announcing today.
Yeah, but that's not about community learning. So just we know that government investment in adult learning has fallen considerably, and I'm talking about specific community adult learning. This has coincided with a decline of 23% of participation in community learning since 2011. And providers have to turn to other pots to finance their offices. If I could just quote the Centre for Social Justice, the kind of funding streams are dizzying, almost as many as 10. So there's the ESFA's 16 to 19 study program, the 19 plus AEB non-formula funding, the 19 plus AEB formula funding, the 19 plus advanced learner loans, 16 plus apprenticeship levy funding, the ESF Communities Lottery Fund, the DFE's Flexible Learning Fund, the Heritage Lottery Fund, the ESF DWP's Way to Work program, and individual learner fees. Is there surely an argument for consolidating these schemes to allow providers to focus more of their efforts on frontline delivery? And my colleague Tom mentioned the European Social Fund, but post-Brexit, would the Shared Prosperity Fund not serve as a good opportunity to consolidate these funding streams? I was talking specifically about adult community learning.
I think all of them offer an opportunity, and the reason I say I broadened it out is because we're talking about segments of the society and overcoming the need that they have. I think they all offer an opportunity for us to simplify the system. The vast majority of those that you read out were actually DFE funds as well. The vast majority of those were ones that you applied for different pockets of funding. It is complex. It is something through FE reform that we are looking to simplify, to make sure that it's easier for people to understand and to target the funding. So that is definitely part of funding the FE reform. But what we're always trying to do is demonstrate and show the value for money, the investment, and what the outcomes have done, how they've changed the learners' outcomes. And some of those funding have been sort of focused on specific outcomes, either through the European Union or even through other measures, which we're trying to get a specific outcome, which is why the fund has been structured in a particular way to try and get a specific policy outcome.
Just finally, before I pass to my colleagues on this area, what is your strategy to boost, as a minister, to boost adult community learning across our country?
I think what we need to do is make sure everybody has access to all those things that are the basics that will enable them to get on and take access to wider learning as well. So in particular, make sure that we have basic English, basic maths, obviously English as a second language if you need that support, but basic digital skills has come very much into the
Okay, no, I agree with all that. I'm talking about specifically about adult community learning. I mean, should there be an adult community learning centre in every town? Should the funding go up? Should the way you fund it in terms of giving most of it to local government be changed? What is the strategy in terms of specifically adult community learning, welcoming all the other schemes that there are? But
I think you're hung, or is it me that's hung?
Can you? I think I can. If you just want to, I can see everybody else. So, but if you just want to reply, even if it's paused for a minute, Minister, can you hear? Can you hear? Yeah. I think your screen is paused for a bit, but if you could just answer, what is your? Did you hear my question? Can everyone else just nod so I can just see? Yeah, so it's the minister's computer that is not working. Oh, you're back. Can you see? We can see you now. That's good. Did you hear any of my question before my last question, Minister?
I think it was effectively, what's the strategy towards community learning? Should we have a community learning centre in every place, etc.? I think the
funding and so on. Yeah, because you haven't said much about it. In fact, the government hasn't said anything hardly at all about adult community learning over the past couple of years. So I just want to know what is specifically happening about adult community learning.
The specific strategy is to focus on the learners and figure out how to help them in wherever they are in life to get access to overcoming some of the challenges they have in terms of basic skills, access to training, more modular training, more flexible training, whether it's delivered through community learning centres, FE colleges, training providers, etc., is less of the issue. There's been a lot of focus, and I would argue a bit too much focus on just the system. It really is about making sure that we unlock all the opportunities for those learners, and they will be delivered through community learning centres, through colleges and through other providers as well. It's about making sure that we get the outcomes right for those learners.
Okay. And so just to be clear, I wasn't focusing on the system, because I quoted to you the really impressive outcomes of community learning and skills providers earlier on, both from Ofsted in terms of Ofsted and mental health and other things. So what I'm just trying to find out is because this is different from the excellent National Skills Fund that you've announced and an apprenticeship policy. I'm still trying to find out what the government's policy is on adult community learning, which is often a very different audience. It looks after the most deprived in very deprived parts of the country.
Yes, and clearly all of the schemes that we have will be to make sure that we access those that are most disadvantaged and further away from the workplace, which is where we talked about the replacement for the European Social Fund with a new version of the same. Obviously, we've got all kinds of different schemes, including traineeships, all focused on that need. But what I've said to the team here is, a bit like you read out before, Rob, with lots and lots of different budget lines. It's not about the budget lines, and it's about enabling the learners and making sure we access those learners in the most effective way possible. And that's what we are talking about in terms of everything that we're doing, and introducing new things such as the digital basic skills has been something that we've done in August this year, recognizing that everybody now is going to need help if they are further away from that and getting access online. But talking about it specifically, community learning is an important part of our overall offer. And it's something that is greatly, does a great job of helping those further away from the workplace into work. But that's what we're really focused on, helping those further away, or helping those people who are in one career and need to shift to another, helping them get on a line of sight to work. And that is probably something that is a bit of a shift in these economic times, to say we need to make sure that what we do delivers the outcome for people that's going to help them get on in terms of their employment.
Okay, thank you. I'll pass on now to Christian, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Minister. Your response then actually feeds quite nicely into to my first question, which is, we've heard that the uptake of the National Retraining Scheme has been relatively slow. So is it still the intention to roll out to get help to retrain across England in 2020, considering that it's probably more important now than ever, with entire sectors and industries facing collapse and mass redundancies?
Yeah, so what the National Retraining Scheme was announced in 2017, and the first part of that was this, as you say, this Get Help to Retrain, which was a consumer-facing website that was rolled out in 6 areas to test and pilot what worked. In particular, how to motivate adults and how to help them overcome their barriers to engage with training again. So that's, as you say, been rolled out in 6 places. Obviously, since then, what we've had is a bigger and a broader announcement with the National Skills Fund to spend, much more in this area of adult skills and making sure that we taking account of the huge technological changes that are going on all around us. And that was even before coronavirus, which has accelerated some of those, to make sure that we have that right investment. So what we will be doing is making sure that the lessons from those 6, which are effectively making sure that adults have access to flexible learning, to modular learning, helping adults be motivated, making sure there's a clear line of sight to job, which is actually one of the learnings that comes from those pilots. It's the thing that motivates people to want to go and study is a clear line of sight to a job. So all of that we've learned from Get Help to Retrain will be part of our new offer for the National Skills Fund. So we will be building on that and making that, but obviously we've got a much bigger scheme now than that was initially announced in 2017.
Thank you for the response. I've got a few, hopefully relatively quick follow-ups. So you said previously that there's, I think it was 2,700 who've accessed the Get Help to Retrain scheme. I was just wondering what assessments actually could be done to look into any measurable improvements in their employment skills. So it's great to say we've got this scheme, but what's the actual output from it?
I'm really sorry, but the connection went partway through. I'm going to turn my video off because that might help. Is that okay, Chair?
I'd rather you had it on if that's okay, because people are watching. Could you want to try again, Christian, please?
Yeah, hopefully you can hear me again now, Julian. So you said previously that roughly 2,700 people have accessed the Get Help to Retrain scheme. Just wondering what assessment has actually been done on the outputs, so to actually measure the improvements in their employment skills.
It's actually, I think, about 3,600 now users who have accessed it. And in terms of the, obviously they're going through the results of those all the time. What they've been trying to, in terms of, I'll have to respond to you, actually, I have to come back in terms of how many people have gone on to get a job. I mean, clearly what's the whole point of the National Retraining Scheme is also to link those local employers and those opportunities, etc., which I would imagine, have probably had a little bit of impact by coronavirus. But, really the key learnings from it has been about what is going to make more people as adults sign up and re-engage with education to enable them to get better prospects. And so that's really been the focus of it. And it's 3,600 users. So quite a small sample size, but still big enough to give us some confidence that the learnings are relevant.
Thank you. And the final one from me for this particular topic is, have we got any sufficient data and information now from the 6 pilots to actually look to learning lessons for a wider rollout across the entire country?
I think there are a lot of lessons from it. I mean, I don't have all the details here, but if you go on the scheme, you can see that some of the things that need to possibly be improved, in terms of where you start and where you finish and how you navigate your way through it. I think the key things are, and the key learning is the line of sight to a job, and to make progression and how you progress, those steps, really clearly visible to everybody. If they can see their line of sight, and I've seen some great examples of this, where you can progress through the ambulance service, for example, start at a level 2 and go right the way up to a level 7. And they're attracting lots of people because of the simplicity of the scheme, which allows you to progress. That's a particular an apprenticeship standard, but that is the big learning, to motivate adults to put their time, when obviously everybody's super busy with families, it is to make sure there's a clear line of sight to a job.
Christian, have you finished?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Ian Mearns.
Thank you very much, Chair. Minister, while I'm not actually wanting to have a go at employers per se, because there are some very, very good, progressive and very engaged employers out there, unfortunately, across the piece, employer-led training is stagnating, and the number of employees receiving job-related training fell from 4.2 million in 2004 to 3.8 million last year, a 9.5% decline in 15 years. And that's at a time when the overall workforce has grown significantly. So in other words, the proportion of people actually doing training supported by their employers by proportion has gone down. So given that the department's employer skills survey found that a third of employers had not provided any training for their staff over the last 12 months, is this acceptable? And by the way, while a third didn't provide any, many didn't provide very much at all. So what are we going to do to re-engage or engage employers into upskilling the workforce of the future? Businesses have a real responsibility, and that's a sort of responsibility which is widely accepted in many of our competitor nations.
Yeah, and it's a very important point. I mean, it really relies on employers. It's a partnership between employers, learners, and the Department for Education to really make sure that we have a system that works well for learners. Progressive employers. I've worked for many employers. They've all massively recognised the value of training. I've had every piece of my training has been paid for by an employer from the age of 16. So there are many employers who really do invest in people and providing access to all kinds of training. But that's not everybody. Obviously, one of the great successes, and I do believe it's a success, has been the apprenticeship system, which obviously is forced larger companies to pay a levy, which of course will be shared with smaller companies or be used to make sure that people have access to training. I'm often asked by employers to, introduce more flexibilities on the levy, etc. And I often say to them, you have 2 years to spend the levy on apprenticeships, and that is what we want you to do. We want you to design and build apprenticeship systems and schemes which will enable people to be upskilled. Now, what that's left, and that's part of this announcement today, is it's good for apprenticeships, which will be a minimum of 1 year, but how do we have access for employees or future employees or those that are redundant to shorter term courses, to more flexible learning? Obviously, we have things that we've introduced rather quickly, like the Skills Toolkit, which we did with employers. That's employers who were offering us training that we've offered for free, and today we've just announced that's gone up to from 17 to 80 courses, and they are fantastic courses. I've actually done myself. They're very, very worthwhile, and they are investments by employers.
If we could just got a lot to get through, just to slightly be more concise, if you can, Ian, please.
Yeah, I think all that sounds well and good, but unfortunately we've got a situation where far too many employers just aren't engaged in the process at all. And there has to be some carrot and some stick here. There's been a significant restructuring of our employment base, and many more SMEs. And, in parts of the world like my own, the very big heavy engineering companies no longer exist to the same extent. So, how are we going to actually get employers to engage in this process of actually preparing their own workforce? Otherwise, we've got a situation where all too many employers are willing to let somebody else do it, and then just use the jobs market to recruit people who've already got training skills. How are we going to get around that? And I'm just also wondering is what your assessment of the balance of cost sharing for adult training between employers, government, and individuals should be.
Well, obviously the apprenticeship scheme is generated 2.5 billion, which is a lot more, double what we spent in 2010. The key thing, as you say, is how does that get to be really working well for SMEs, so that SMEs gain more confidence with that system, so they gain more confidence with apprentices and training people, and the loyalty that you get from somebody you've trained. This has always been an age-old dilemma. Do I do I engage in training myself or do I let somebody else do it? And I had a conversation with a number of NHS trusts the other day and said, look, you know, we've had massive skill shortages in nursing and in some parts of our National Health Service. We've been away to, you know, Spain and Portugal and the Philippines and all kinds of places. We need to take the effort to be more strategic to help use the apprenticeship system to train more nurses. Now, we have that now. We have going right the way up all the nursing standards to make sure that that's there. I think the apprenticeship system, I mean, I know I am a big fan, having done one myself, and you know, it worked out very well for me, having started at 16, but it really is a fantastic way of getting all parts of the supply chain as well to engage. Okay. I'm very hopeful that that 25% that gets really through to those small and medium-sized businesses and gain the confidence to invest in training.
But there's a fly in the ointment, Minister, as well, in terms of, you know, you've been through the apprenticeship route, but all too many young people that we come across as a committee who just say they've never heard about apprenticeships. And I'm afraid to say the flow of information, advice and guidance for young people has not been good, but it's virtually non-existent for adults who might want to or think about retraining. So how are we going to get embedded within the system a good process of independent, impartial advice and guidance for young people, but also for adults? Because, Minister, I'm afraid to say there's lots of bad advice out there, and it usually is led by bums on seats funding regimes at whatever level, you know, because, you know, providers in particular are interested in getting people into their courses, and whether that's the right course for the individual is another matter. So how are we going to get over that? We do need to really beef up independent, impartial advice and guidance at all levels.
You are absolutely
not sure if you can.
You are absolutely spot on. I mean, apprenticeships, I think, are the best kept secret in the whole country. I did one 35 years ago, but it's about careers advice, both in schools, but as you say, adults as well. Being able to see your progression through an apprenticeship or through these full-time courses we've announced today, being able to see how you can get somewhere is the biggest, clearest motivator. Careers is part of the FE reform, and we'll be putting a lot more effort into making sure that that piece works, because you're absolutely right, that navigates and sets people off on their life path. And whether that's a good one or whether that's one that the advice didn't work out, really that critical time and that critical having all that information is vital. So that is a key plank and absolutely a key part that we have to get right and improve. It's not good enough today.
And given your announcement today, or the government's announcement today, will there also be support for people who've got previous qualifications which frankly are no longer relevant at our local jobs markets? So in other words, they need to retrain, but they've already got a level 3 or a level 4 possibly in another skill which is no longer relevant at the local jobs market. Will they be supported as well?
Well, that is supported, but that's supported through the loan system. So it's only for if you haven't reached up to a level 3. So that's I think probably up to about 10 million adults who haven't got that so far. But you're right, in terms of making sure that you can access that in shorter chunks, in more digestible chunks, is how we're going to really help people, you know, and also making it flexible, making the most of this online capability that people have now to learn and blended learning. So that's part of the offer that we'll be setting out, and that's what we're working on.
I think the department and ministers, you need to give that some thought, because, you know, a currently irrelevant qualification is no good in the jobs market, and quite often, you know, because of, you know, businesses and local economies moving on, you know, people have trained in particular things where their skills are no longer relevant, and do they not deserve support as well?
Yes, and you know, don't forget that the apprenticeship system, for all its flaws, in terms of people knowing it exists, 2 million adults have actually retrained and reskilled or upskilled using that scheme. So I personally, and that's available to everybody. You know, obviously you need to get the job that goes alongside it, but most adults are also, you know, very much looking for the job aspect as well. You know, by that time you have bills to pay and you've got to, you know, keep in work. And what we're trying to do is make sure we can make it easier for people who are in work, even if they want to shift to a different career, to be able to do that. So I do think the apprenticeship scheme is also a great way to go up the levels.
So just to quickly recap from my perspective, you are really, truly considering beefing up impartial advice and guidance at all levels.
Yes, absolutely. And that's both in schools and for adults as well.
Thank you very much.
Caroline.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Minister. Just to go back to points made by Ian on the relevance of training and Christian on the outcomes. You said there'd been 3,600 people who've engaged in retraining, which is great. But I want to understand how it's working. In order to know whether a scheme's working, you need to understand what your desired outcome is going to be. Is it being in employment, short-term or long-term? What do you consider success in retraining? So what specific data are you collecting from those 3,600 people, or from a proportion of them, in order to assess whether your schemes are retraining the right people in the right skills, in the right quantity, and whether those people are gaining gainful employment as a result?
I mean, so just to make sure it's completely clear, this is not everybody who's retrained. Obviously, we've got many other ways that people have retrained, including the apprenticeship system, but this is the Get Help to Retrain pilot. So, you know, one of the key things, I mean, we have the data which is being collected, which will be available in November, December. So we'll get much more of the granular, you know, destinations where people ended up, etc. But I think one of the key learnings has definitely been about the need to motivate people by them seeing a clear line to a job. That is overwhelmingly what has come out. If they can see that if they invest their time and energy into training and doing this, it will lead them into that opportunity. And that's actually been one of the key sort of insights we've had. But in terms of the granular detail, then November, December is when we'll get the data back on those 3,600 users and where they've actually ended up.
So what level of data are you collecting on those people, and what sort of figures would you consider to be successful?
Well, actually, in terms of the number, because it was a pilot of 6, I mean, 6 places, it was a pilot with, you know, a relatively small number of users. I'm not, you know, this isn't a stop go or, you know, go no go point. We already know that we need to invest in this area of adult skills and adult training. So in a way, it's been superseded in terms of, you know, the knowledge of the need. And in a way, coronavirus has accelerated that to a point that we absolutely know that there's people who were in jobs in January, February, that they absolutely thought they would be, you know, still in, and they would keep them for years to come. And, you know, this threat of automation and artificial intelligence and robotics, which is what we talked about in terms of the need to shift skills, you know, would be somewhere in the future. And some of those things have been accelerated massively. So we know already that we need to invest in this, which is why the announcements today were so heavily focused on adult skills. But what we'll use these pilots for is to make sure the offer, how we reach people, the flexibility is there to make sure it's as widely used as possible.
So I appreciate, Minister, that COVID has provided a challenging environment and maybe means that the skills that the employers need may be different to that which they required earlier in the year. But what is your department doing, and what data is it collecting to try and ensure that you are training people in the right skills, and what proportion of employment, allowing for the fact that COVID may have changed that figure, what proportion of those people going on to full-time employment would you consider a success of the scheme that makes it worthwhile to invest in as a government?
Just a brief answer if possible.
Okay, we collect destination data, so whether you went into a job and what level of job you went into. So that will be when we get that back in November and December. If you look at the apprenticeship scheme, I think 91% end up in either go studying a higher level apprentice or in full-time job after the apprenticeship. You know, those are really, really good outcomes. That's probably at the top bar. I mean, we don't set a outcome ratio to say, you know, if it doesn't, you know, we still need to solve this problem, which is making sure that adults have easy access, flexible access, modular access to skills and up training via apprenticeship scheme if you're in work, or via full-time employment, full-time study as well. And that is how we're going to do that, by making it as broad as possible.
Thank you.
Tom, can you do a quick one, please?
Well, I think it's quite important, so I'll sort of spend a necessary amount of time on it. I think really devolution is central to this. I don't think it's a side issue. I mean, I've seen an example of the adult education system not working at all when it was centralised. There was no strategy, there was no coherence, and I saw it turned around locally when the power of the AEB budget was devolved. I don't think this is a fringe issue, and I'm glad to hear that the UK Shared Prosperity Fund money has been passed down to 7 or 9 mayoral authorities, but that still leaves a vast majority of the country that hasn't happened, including where my constituency is in Suffolk. So if the structures aren't there to enable that devolution, then I would advise that those structures be put in place as soon as possible, because it makes a critical difference. There needs to be coherence between the different local areas, but local areas need to be empowered to have a tailored approach to skills in their area and the specific skills needs in their area.
I 100% agree. And at the moment we have obviously, half of the budget devolved to those areas, those mayoral or combined authorities. But the whole focus of FE reform is to make sure that we can have a system which really takes into account those local players, those local activity, also making sure that provision is very strong, that people know what provision they should be investing in for their area. It's too high level at the moment, too broad brush. It has to be, there's 2 things we need to do. One is to really embed the employer-led standards, so people are studying things that are truly valuable to employers across this country. And the second is to shape that locally and focus that locally based on the local jobs market, the local opportunities that are there. So those 2 things are absolutely vital and the key pillar of FE reform.
And I just would, I think there are some officials who in the department who seem to be a little bit protectionist over devolving these matters. I mean, that was about a couple of years ago, and I'm sure it's all changed for the better. But I would just stress, it was a case in the area that I was working that money was being spent on basket weaving, and people brushing up on their, French classes before a holiday, and ultimately that is not the way this money should be spent. It should be spent on skills, upskilling, and transforming people's lives.
Absolutely right. And, it's a massive system, and, obviously you will get some of these anomalies, but the line to a site of a job and being able to help people to get on and get up in the workplace, I mean, that's probably motivated every single one of us for every bit of study, certainly me, for every bit of study I've done. And that's what we need to make sure. In terms of how it's done, outcome-based, I'm really, really mostly focused on the learner and making sure that they get a good job, which helps the employer, which helps the economy. That is who we're serving.
Any more, Tom? Just given what Ian and others have said about the lack of employer training, and of course your announcement will make a difference today. But have you considered, given that companies get a research and development credit for the amount of research they do from the Treasury, would you not agree that a skills tax credit that was targeted to incentivize employers to offer training to lower skilled employees would help close the nation's skills deficit?
I know that's been talked of a number of times, and it is an interesting idea. I think again, the key thing is making sure that we get the right outcomes. And when we've looked at that across various countries, and both you and I have spoken about it, and I think you've probably had this answer several times. And when we've asked people to look into it, they've come back and said, well, this sometimes doesn't result in the right outcome. Obviously, the apprenticeship levy is the biggest skills investment change that we've made over the last few years. But they continue to look at these things. What is it that's going to make this system work better? But it really, at the moment, I'm not being told that has got the right, necessarily the right outcome-based support. But I know, Rob, that it's something that you've mentioned, or Chair, you've mentioned several times, and I'm sure that they'll continue to consider it. Anything that makes a difference, that gets people to invest in the right skills training, is something that we will continually keep under review.
Thank you. Kim.
Thanks, Rob. Minister, you've mentioned there's a massive skills shortage in certain sectors. You know, anticipated 250,000 shortage of social care workers. Can you explain why you think this is and your expectations of the take-up of the initiative that you've announced today? And will the increase in skills result in an increase in pay to this workforce? Thank you.
Well, in my experience, an increase in skills normally does follow an increase in pay. You know, that's where you have more skills, you've got you know, more to offer to the workplace. I think social care has had you know, some specific issues, and I know you mentioned pay. I think around pay, around using you know, the sort of you know, people who they could get access to very easily. I think it's one thing that's changed under coronavirus is our focus on the importance of social care and how valuable that is as a career, and how valuable it is to all of our old people. I was at a care home last week. It's, you know, it's unbelievable how valuable these people are. People who haven't seen their relatives, you know, apart from through a window for months. I believe, and you know, myself and others have looked at this in the past, that we do need to professionalise social care. So there are now a number of apprenticeships in social care, and through all of the levels of social care and nursing. And what we need to do is make those work much more flexibly together. I still think there's more work to do in this area. But social care, that we've just introduced the new T level in education and early years, but you know, expanding that in the health sector and health and social care, I think will also be a good start to get the right skills and people with high skill levels to be able, because it is in many cases a high job. Thank you. Kim?
I was just going to ask why you think there is a shortage, because you've mentioned shortages in other sectors, Minister, and that will require a different type of training. And going forward, in terms of COVID and a lot of training now online, how do you anticipate that particular sector being supported?
I think the apprenticeship scheme is still a very good use for this sector. And one of the things that we've seen is the use of this levy being used, you know, to access more broadly in health and social care. But that to me, we've got many now apprenticeship standards in all different dementia care, in specific end of life care, in general social care, and a number of specialties as well in social care. So I would suspect now that obviously we've got this sort of change in our economy with some of the, you know, we'll have increased redundancies from some of the jobs roles that people have had in the past being severely impacted by coronavirus. And I think a lot of people will be attracted by health and social care. In a way, coronavirus, whilst it's you know, it's been terrible, it's been a great advert for the health service and for social care for people who are coming forward now more and more wanting to work in those sectors and get the right training in those sectors.
Gillian, can I just ask, and in terms of individual learning accounts, where do you see that fitting in terms of this new initiative and the future of like the lifelong learning offer?
Well, I think that, you know, having the opportunity to study full-time as well as part-time, level 3, to be able to go back and study level 3 in health and social care, and there's a number of qualifications, vocational and technical qualifications in that area, means that will open up a whole new cohort who perhaps have always dreamed of going into this, but you know, for one reason they went off into another path, but they would like to go back into nursing, health and social care. And I've met many people on my travels who've retrained in their 40s actually to get into health and social care because they've found that, you know, it was something they always wanted to do, but they never got the chance.
Thanks, Chair. That's my final question. Thanks, Minister.
Thank you. Tom, did you have any further questions on the section?
No, I'm good.
Thank you. Can I bring Flo in, please?
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to ask Minister about green jobs. So adult skills and lifelong learning are central to a jobs-led approach and to tackling the climate emergency, as well as in-work poverty and unemployment. So what work is the department doing to forecast what jobs will be needed under a green economy, to increase relevant courses and to recruit people to those courses, to make sure that we are able to train in the skills needed for new green jobs?
Well, we do have a number of apprenticeship standards which are green jobs, everything from modular building to, renewables and working on that technology. So that's something that's been starting. The industry have been kind of pushing that in a way as well. We're also working with the ECITB, which is the engineering sector, which has got a lot of people at the moment who are working in oil and gas, who want to shift those skills over into the renewables sector. So how we facilitate that. So we're working with them to facilitate that. I've also been working with the Minister for Energy in Bays to figure out how we really put this focus on green jobs, because you're right, that is a huge opportunity. There's huge shortages, there's huge skill shortages, and we need to make sure we're clear about those and we make that offer available. I expect that we'll have some of the level 3 that will be focused on these kind of capabilities in the future. That is an opportunity. Even though coronavirus has disrupted our economy, it's kind of hit us for 6 in a way, it's disrupted our lives, we weren't expecting it. We had massive skills shortages going into this, and we had the green jobs revolution that we needed to solve for as well. So we do have lots of opportunity to get ourselves out.
Got it. Thank you. Fleur?
Thank you. I look forward to watching and mapping that as it rolls out. I'd like to move on to talk about spending. Do you agree with the Institute of Fiscal Studies cited in the Auger Review that spending on adult education fell by 45% in real terms between 2009-10 and 2017-18?
Yes, because that figure was looking at adult education, but I do think it does slightly miss the point that we at the same time had a big rise in investment in apprenticeships, of which 50% are used for adult education and retraining. So yes, in terms of that budget and the access to full-time courses for adults, but of course we also at the same time had a parallel path that we were investing in, which I think we've invested 2.5 billion since 2010, of which half is used by adults.
I did see the result of these cuts in my area of London and in the courses that were available for uptake. Will you be making the case for a real terms increase of the education budget, adult education budget, in the next spending review?
Well, I think the announcement today which is kind of ahead of the spending review, has effectively said that we will now have access for level 3 to any adult that wants to get access to level 3 in those areas that map onto where we have skills needs in the country, and there's their high value courses to employers. So they're going to lead you to a job. So that's really the announcement today. So, every adult in this country, as of April 2021, will have access to being able, as you said, go and study full-time level 3 to be able to get the skills they need to be able to retrain.
So you're saying this is the end of the increases, or for the next spending review, will you be going to battle with the Exchequer as well?
Well, no, we've got the National Skills Fund, we've got FE reform, and of course we have a spending review bid, which is really focused around supporting the FE reform and that white paper, and making sure that we really focus on technical education and the power of technical education and vocational training in this country. But I think it's good news that we've been able to announce this today, and it certainly is a big step forward to give that lifelong learning capability to people when they're ready to go back and study.
Thank you. Christian, do you have any follow-up?
Yeah, sorry, Chair. Participation in adult learning is obviously dropped in recent years. So I think it's dropped by 33% roughly. So the lowest participation rate in decades. So I'm just wondering, how will you get participation increasing again during your term as Minister?
Well, I think these things that we've set out today are very much focused on trying to enable that. So giving an entitlement to level 3 to every adult. Up to now, it's capped at 19 to 23-year-olds, and obviously 16 to 18-year-olds have a full offer. So if you were over 23 today, or if you're 24, you couldn't access that apart from via a loan, and it's something that hasn't really taken off. So I think making sure this capability is there, and then making the loans much easier and chunking them into more bite-sized chunks for those higher levels, so going on to level 4 and 5, is the announcement we've made today. So that's what we're going to deliver, which hopefully will really change those numbers.
Thank you. I've been looking into one of Ian's questions earlier about roughly a third of employers not providing any training. Some of the feedback from that study actually said that one of the boundaries for providing training was having a good local provider. So I mean, what's the department doing, or working across government with BAYS, for example, to actually make sure that we are setting up providers or working with providers across the country to make sure that boundary is no longer there?
Well, I mean, I'd just like to say, obviously, that means 2/3 of employers in this country are investing in training. And as I say, my personal experience working for 30 years in various industries is they very much take training and investment seriously. But your point for those that don't, and access to training providers, there's been a revolution in training providers in this country. Obviously, we have FE colleges, which we have FE colleges all over the country. We have institutes of technology now, which are being rolled out. We have national colleges, but we also have the independent training providers who have really grown to service the apprenticeship market as well, and to make sure that they really react to local needs. And therefore we do, I think, have a market and adapt to local needs, and really we need to make sure that SMEs, we help SMEs on this journey to help them invest in training and more apprenticeships as well.
I agree with the majority of what you said. I just think as we've gone through COVID, some of those independent providers have certainly struggled, and some have even gone under. However, I'll move on. So in the words of the Secretary of State, participation in adult further education has also plummeted from 3.1 million in 2010-11 to 2.1 million in 18-19. Are the reasons understood well by the department?
I think the reasons are, I mean, I think the access to a free entitlement at that level is something that obviously has impacted numbers. People having to take loans for various things, and also, I guess, at the same time having the apprenticeship system on offer. So the apprenticeship system was possibly easier to access, and that was something that was introduced and really kick-started, excuse the phrase, but really, ramped up over the period. And obviously from an apprenticeship viewpoint, you get paid to do your training, and you're studying the right thing because an employer's guiding you. That's quite a compelling offer. So I would imagine that some of the learning has been moved over there. But clearly the announcement today is meant to make sure that whether you've got a job, or whether you're looking to return to work after you've had a family, or whether you're looking to switch careers, that all of those offers are available for you. So that's why the level 3 entitlement is very important. And I think I'm sure it'll be welcomed by the sector.
I completely agree with the training aspects. It's why I've taken on 2 apprentices myself in my office recently. But I mean, obviously, when you talk about loans and removing some of these barriers, fantastic headline. But for certainly areas like the Northwest, where actually some of the jobs markets are collapsing, and I'm thinking specifically about aviation, aerospace, where normally we would look to put quite a few kind of apprentices or trained to go into that sector. What are we doing to kind of alleviate that pressure for a sector that, quite frankly, is failing and does need a lot more help? So is there anything further that can be done by the department to overcome some of these more structural issues?
Well, I think, clearly coronavirus has had a massive impact, but also a very uneven impact. So you mentioned the aviation industry. Certain industries have seen their revenues just plummet. And, you know, it's clear the restrictions that, as we're all living with coronavirus, are going to massively impact. And it's not just in our country, it's the global impact of, you know, people not traveling as much at the moment. It has been uneven because, on the other hand, you've got food, anybody involved in food, involved in technology, anybody involved with health, policing, massively trying to recruit people. So you do have skills shortages and shortages of people in some halves of the economy, and then obviously this gap, which has really all been concertinaed into a couple of months, and that is really where we're trying to focus. That's why we've come up with some of the shorter term things like the skills toolkit, like boot camps, the digital boot camps. We'll be looking to extend those across the country, really trying to help people move from areas where it's going to take longer to recover, and maybe the job that they had may no longer be there. This has accelerated a decline of some sectors as well that we were on already, but it's very much quickened it, and to help people to be able to transfer those skills and move them over here. Now, there's some, you know, we have an airport very close to me as well, where I represent, and, you know, there's a lot of focus been put by mental health, for example. We need loads more people in mental health, and they're working very closely to offer opportunities to those people who are being made redundant at the airport.
Okay. Christian, have you done?
Done, Chair.
Thank you. I'm going to move over to Apsana now, please.
Thank you, Chair. Hi, Minister. My question is really around digital skills. So the new entitlement to digital skills is not accompanied by additional funding. It's good to see sort of introduction initiatives such as the low wage scheme, but what assessment has the government made on reassessing whether to provide additional funding, an actual, you know, funding commitment to really commit to digital skills?
Well, obviously digital skills, if anybody was in doubt before, nobody has any doubt that they are absolutely vital. And, you know, certainly during this period with coronavirus, we've all had to rely on them. And you know, some of us have had a very sort of fast course in terms of how to deal with this. There are a number of ways that you can access digital skills. So the first is the skills toolkit, online, free, available, intermediate, beginner, intermediate and advanced courses, really helping people get more comfortable online. As you say, we've introduced the entitlement to everybody to have a basic digital skills training within college as well. So that's something we introduced as of August. We have more skills toolkit courses been announced today, so that will broaden the access as well. And then we have digital boot camps, which, you know, for some people, depending on where you're up to on that journey, will be there to help you get sort of really proficient so that you can use these skills in the workplace. So there is a huge focus on digital, and I expect that will continue, because that's one of the things that we know is a must. There isn't a business across this country now pretty much that isn't digital in some way, shape or form.
But is there an estimate in terms of sort of how many adults you're expecting to take up the new digital skills entitlement in 2020-21?
I don't have that. I'm sure they have done estimates for the budget, but I don't have that number with me, but I can get that number to you if it's available. But, you know, as many as possible. I think there'll be a huge demand. Because, you know, people were kind of putting off some of these things before. Perhaps they could get around it in a different way, or there was still some services available, or they could use face-to-face. I think one of the things that coronavirus has done is it's massively meant that everybody understands the power, even to talk to your relatives, has been, you know, enabled through digital. So we expect demand to grow.
Can I just ask, I mean, I think data is really, really important, and given the fact that we know there's about 11.9 million adults, and that's according to the Learning and Work Institute evidence, that lack digital skills. And there are also regional disparities as well. So, for example, the Greater Manchester Combined Authority estimated that between 1/4 and 1/5 of Greater Manchester's adult population lack essential digital skills. So it would be really good if the department could at some point sort of share some data intelligence around that, so we can understand that a bit more as a committee. Thank you.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right in terms of regional disparities. There are massive regional disparities in terms of productivity, in terms of skills. And, you know, the more that we can understand that, the more that we can really target our offer and make sure people feel confident enough to take that first step because that's often what holds people back as well. So hopefully we've got a broad enough offer, but yeah, absolutely, we won't stop until we've made sure everyone's got access to those digital skills training, because they're essential.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Kim.
Thank you, Chair. Minister, your announcement today intends to increase the number of adults taking level 4 and 5 qualifications. Is the department considering maintenance grants to raise participation in level 3 to 5 courses funded by advanced learner loans? Thank you.
In terms of the advanced learner loans, obviously you get access to the loans, and I think you can get access to a maintenance grant kind of loan as well. But the most of the sort of grants are dealt with through the bursary fund, the bursary funding arrangements that are available. But there won't be sort of going back to a sort of maintain grant kind of system. It's following similar to the the student loan system. But what we're trying to do is to make it easier to digest, so to make those courses shorter, make the loans and the cost of them shorter, so that people can take one and then move on to the next one, which is, I think, quite an important part of it. And also, if people are in full-time work, they can access them as well. They can access them part-time, which is what used to happen a lot. Certainly I remember from the way I did it, that was certainly a way lots of people got on, and when there was many more numbers doing level 4 and 5, it was usually people who were in work who were looking to to be able to do this in evenings and in their own time. So we just need to make sure that it's flexible enough.
Thanks, Minister. And that kind of follows on from my next question, really, because there is a need to make post-18 funding more flexible so that adults can learn on a modular basis and not choose between work and study. So do you believe that your announcement today allows this to happen? And do you have any plans to speed up the introduction and expansion of T-level provision to help with the anticipated rise in youth unemployment?
Thank you so much for mentioning T-levels, because T-levels are an absolutely fundamental part of, first of all, bringing the employer-led standards into qualifications, so that young people get on, as Ian said, on the careers path much more easily, and they kind of starting to learn things that are highly valuable in the workplace. So we started this year 44 providers, and with 3 initial T-levels. We're growing that to, I think it's 68 and 7 T-levels next year, and then we'll be rolling them out fully across the country by 2023-4. So that's the period. There was a lot of pressure to delay T-levels. Obviously, introducing a new qualification in the middle of coronavirus is difficult, and we were a bit unsure about aspects of that, but we decided actually it's so important to start this reform, this revolution in our technical education, so that young people can start. And if you go to a college, go and see the T-levels. It's absolutely amazing what they're learning, and how technical and how up to date and how quickly they're learning these skills. And they've only been at it for 2 weeks. So I completely agree, they're a vital pillar to offer our young people.
And in terms of the flexible learning, I think Kim was asking, i.e., can you get the train is going to the destination, but you can hop on and off at regular intervals, and it all builds up in the same way. I think that's what, is that right, Kim? That's what you're...
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, I think that's what we're trying to, do in terms of the modular learning. Obviously, we have to set out how these things are going to work together, with apprenticeships, with full-time learning, with T-levels. The great thing about it is they're all built on the same employer-led standards, and that will be the thread that goes right the way through. And it's quite a good system because it's organic as well, because obviously as employers update their understanding of what the latest systems are, or the latest equipment or technology, that will be fed in through the Institute. So that's what I think has given us the confidence actually to invest more in FE than we ever have before, because we're confident that actually it will lead to really good job outcomes. And in reply to your earlier question, I've just looked up at my notes. I think the advanced bursary is about £46.5 million, the advanced bursary system.
Thank you, Minister.
Have you finished, Kim?
Yes, I have. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks,
Minister.
Caroline. If you unmute yourself.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of the individual learning accounts, Minister, in Scotland, those accounts, the courses that one can sit, are limited to those which are aligned to Scotland's labour market strategy, where they feel the needs are for their workforce to be trained. Are there plans to do that in England? And if they are, where do you think the specific needs are in the workforce at the moment?
Yes, the intention is to focus on those courses that can lead to closing a skills gap or leading to a good job and career outcome. So that is, the labour market input. However, if you look across the country at the amount of areas where we do have skills gaps, and that's not just geographical locations, but that's in terms of sectors, it's very broad and very wide. As I said before, anything from teaching to policing to nursing, health to social care, to construction, to engineering, to anything to do with green jobs and science and data and digital. There is an almost unending list of areas where we really do have some quite significant skills shortages. So I think they'll be quite broad in terms of the range of occupations and sector areas, but they are focused on those areas where we do see skills shortages, as opposed to those that potentially there isn't a large growth in terms of jobs in the future.
Thank you.
Thanks. Just in terms of apprenticeships, where is the government at in meeting the 2.3% apprenticeship target by March 2021? And is the data going to be readily published, and how are the public bodies going to be held to account?
Yes, we are on target for that. I did have the figures here, but we are absolutely on target for that, and we've been stepping up, making sure that that is a key focus, because obviously that's something we can do ourselves. So we will be publishing those figures.
And that's across all public bodies?
Yes, yes.
Okay, it'll be grateful if you could let the committee have those details.
Yep, will do.
And do you think that it might be worthwhile setting a more ambitious apprenticeship goal for the public sector? So, for example, if the public sector were to hire 50,000 new members of staff a year and the target was increased by 5 percentage points each year, you could end up with 4,000 new apprenticeships in 2021 and over 11,000 a year by 2024. Why not increase the target to 5%?
I think where we're probably going to focus, I mean, we can look at that idea. I'm all to try and get more apprentices, and also there's obviously an incentive for people to use their levy money. But I think the most important thing really is to make sure that we have the system working in those areas where we have massive skills gaps. So we've done a lot of work with the NHS, for example, with the ambulance service, to make sure that we have all the levels of apprenticeship standards available so that they can start to utilise their levy money as much.
I mean, do you think the target should be increased? If you're meeting the 2.3% target and you're going to show us those figures, do you think it could be increased?
I think it depends where we have the standards and where we have the gaps. So I think I'd probably go for a more targeted approach personally, but it's certainly something we'll look at and keep under review. If the focus is to try and increase the number of apprentices across the public sector, then absolutely I agree with that.
And the public sector procurement contracts, do you think they should be conditional on the number of apprentices the candidates for that procurement employs?
I think that probably would be harder to administer than probably what we get back in return. But we have been talking about the 5% club and supporting the 5% club, which is, where there is this desire for employers to focus on making sure that they can try and recruit more apprentices, and up to 5%.
But if a company wants a government contract, why should you not make it a condition that they should employ apprentices, given that it's a strategic aim of the government?
Yeah, obviously that's not my role. That's the role of the Cabinet Office, I think, in terms of the procurement and the contracts. But
you might have a view on it.
I do have a view on it, but I'm sure there's, you know, there's many views on what you should put in a government contract to make sure that you get an outcome for many different departments. I think in general, the most important thing is I think most businesses are bought into the power of the apprenticeship system, particularly now we've worked very closely together to make the standards work. We have to make progression more visible through the apprenticeship system. That's something I've asked the Institute to look at. But I think in general, most people are bought into that. We just need to make sure the system works well and flexibly enough for them.
And in terms of the Institutes of Technology, you briefly mentioned them. What is the time frame? Because you published your prospectus, I think, in February this year, and said that the competition would launch later in the year. What's the timetable and how many do you plan there to be built?
Which are you talking specifically about the Institute's Technology, the Wave 2?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, in Wave 1 we have 12, of which 9 are working today, and the other 3 are coming on stream. And Wave 2 we have 8 more, which will be sort of spread around. So one of the criteria is, you know, it has to be representing an area that doesn't already have an Institute of Technology. So we can
and when will the competition be launched for Wave 2?
I think in the autumn is when we're planning to launch that competition.
Okay, autumn as in before Christmas.
Autumn's usually before Christmas, I think.
Yeah.
But hopefully,
but autumn has a very elasticated definition when it comes to Whitehall. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you know, some things have obviously, you know, been slowed down, but this is a big area of investment. We spent 290 million on IoTs, and you know, there's some fantastic. And when you talk about, you know, Kim was talking about level 4 and 5, IoTs are really going to be the place where there's going to be a real huge focus on level 4 and 5.
And do you want them to be very closely linked to FE colleges where they're in the relevant places?
Well, the way the structure works for an IoT is it's an FE colleges working with universities, working with leading employers, and the 3 of them have to put a bid together. So by design, they all have that collaboration in them, which is what I think is going to make them super strong. I went to a cybersecurity one the other day where they're doing degree apprenticeships for cybersecurity. And, you know, it's amazing, actually, the opportunities that the Institute of Technology can give to young people.
And before I bring in my colleagues, Kim and Ian, just to end, you'll be pleased to know, but could I just ask you in terms, I know we talked a lot about adult community learning at the beginning, but I mean, it might be helpful if you make some kind of speech or set out what your position is in terms of supporting adult community learning, because however welcome the announcements are today, which I think are very good indeed, that is very different, and we're talking about very different things, and I think it would be quite good given that there hasn't been a strategy paper since the very early days of the coalition government for you or the Department of Education set out its position on supporting adult community learning.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point, and you know, and the only sort of I guess comment I'd make is everything we're doing is to support adult learners in the community. You know, everything we're doing is to support that cohort of people, no matter where they are, at what stage, what basic needs or what other needs they need, to help them into the labour market and help them get on in the labour market in an area where there's prospects and good jobs. That is what we're fully focused on.
Thank you. Kim.
Thank you, Minister. I just wanted to pick up a little bit on apprenticeships and wanted to know if you could clarify if the 12-week rule for finding an apprentice another job following redundancy will be reviewed and increased in those sectors that have been seriously impacted by COVID-19, because 12 weeks is not an awful lot of time in this climate to find a new job. Thank you.
So we've been focused on a number of things to help with apprenticeships during the uncertainty of coronavirus. So the first thing is we moved everything online, or we asked everybody to move things online as much as possible, and a lot of the training continued. Obviously, apprentices were also permitted to be furloughed, so they could carry on training while they were under furlough. If they are made redundant, we've committed to, if you've got less than 6 months left or you're 75% of your way through. So if you're on a longer apprenticeship and you're 75% of your way through, we will support you to continue your training, even if you've been made redundant. If you are outside that, we help with this matching service, and we spend 12 weeks trying to help you get another option so that you continue your training, get another option if you're, earlier in your apprenticeship. If that doesn't happen and you can't get another opportunity, then what we have done now, and we've asked all training providers to provide, is this partial learner record, so that a learner can take what they've already done, and then when the market picks up a bit, they can transfer what they've already done onto a new apprenticeship. So we're trying to do that as much as possible. I have actually asked them recently to look into, does it make a difference if we increase it from 12 weeks to 16 weeks or 20 weeks? I mean, clearly, it can make a difference to the training provider, but in terms of the jobs and whether that changes with the picture with coronavirus, the same as we said about the furlough scheme and now the job support package, it doesn't really, because in the short term it's still it's still very difficult to find those jobs. After saying that, the matchmaking service that we've set up, 500 employers now are on there with vacancies, very good quality vacancies. So we are matching redundant apprentices, of which there's not been a huge number yet, but of course, we don't know what's going to happen with the end of furlough, etc. But, trying to make sure we're there so that people can complete their apprenticeship or take the value of it and help match them to another job offer is the absolute focus. And of course, we've got the £2,000 apprenticeship incentive scheme, which has only just started, which hopefully will also lead to an increase in numbers of will incentivize people to take on and make that decision to take an apprenticeship.
Ian.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I would just point out to the Minister that the sun crossed the equator last week, so we're now into autumn officially. So
that's not the DFE's autumn, I'm pretty sure.
That's what I was alluding to when I said, would it be before Christmas? Is that? Do you have a question, Ian? Was that it? What a lovely way to end. Can I thank you, Minister, really thorough answers, and for also for the announcement today, which I think is great news, really great news, and look forward to working with you and hearing from you in the future. Thank you. Order.
Thank you, Chair.